Welcome back to Cocktails and Classics. We're still working our way through Band of Brothers with episode 2. Day of Days is the episode title. And last week we did the pilot. We talked about how it kind of like set us up for this big D-Day battle that we're going into, kind of pre-D-Day battle prep and stuff. So, Ben, you said you had seen the first 10 minutes or something, you said before, if you even remember watching the first 10 minutes.
I did not remember even watching those 10 minutes. So, yeah, pretty much was just like going into it blind. So,
One, I wasn't, well, I guess it makes sense because it was night. Wasn't expecting it to be so dark at the beginning. Like, it was very hard to see. I mean, I'm sure that's what it felt like during that battle and like that mission that they went on, but like I was kind of like struggling to like make sense sometimes of what all was going on. And maybe that was just my setup. I was just on my laptop watching it, so maybe it's not the best apparatus to be watching something like that. I feel like a much larger screen in a very dark room would have been a lot better.
yeah, I will say watching, I was downstairs in the basement watching, so I didn't really have any issues with it. My actual takeaway from that entry kind of scene there goes back to our conversation from last week of like,
The VFX holding up, or
were they just given a blank check? Because the effects hold up. They hold up. They look good still.
yeah, I mean,
Which is shocking, because this isn't a movie. It's literally it's a mini series. Like, how much money was HBO spending on this?
I feel like we have the
And
technology for that.
is this going to be? Is I just wonder how we're gonna look like. I don't know. This was the late '90s or early 2000s, right? This was what, or maybe it was 2000,
2001.
2001. Okay, so it's been 23 years. Are we gonna look in like a decade and a half at some of the stuff that's come out in like the 2020s and be like, or the late to mid 2010s? Do we think it'll hold up still? Like, how far will technology have
I think it
advanced?
definitely depends on the movie.
Well, even like not even a movie. Think of like a Game of Thrones where everyone like raves about how good the effects are, right? How much is that going to
Yeah.
be affected by? Like, is that going to still be such a high bar 10 years from now? Because it's already been, I mean, from when it started, it's been a minute. It's probably been almost a decade since Game of Thrones started, right?
At least.
So yeah, another 10 years, is that still going to seem like a pinnacle of special effects the way that it was talked about at the time? Because I'm not saying that the Band of Brothers effects are flawless. Don't get me wrong. They're by no means flawless. But two things I thought they did very smart on it was, one, utilizing the dark and like the night of everything really helped.
Mm-hmm.
But and then there was something else I noticed with it too, was like I thought the way that they had the gunfire going across and kind of also helped draw your attention away from just the CGI of the planes. I thought that was really clever of them to do, so that you
Yeah.
weren't just like sitting there focused on like, oh man, this plane looks pretty computer generated. But it's like, oh wait, something's flashing across the screen and it's catching your eye. So like as you're kind of noticing it, you're not really drawn right to the CGI of what's on the screen. But
Yeah, and I wonder how much of it is kind of like the other thing is like keep like the cam shaky a little bit, cutting very quickly. You're not sitting on a shot for like super long. I feel like not that it was like bad, but to me the worst part was when after they jump out of the plane and they're like coming down, like you can kind of clearly tell it was like green screened until like they get right to the
yeah,
ground, and then it looks like completely different and you're like, oh, okay. But that's more so I feel like just kind of noticing that, like, you wouldn't like it doesn't look that much different between like them in the sky to them actually landing on like solid ground, but you can kind of just like tell, and it's like, whatever. But yeah, like the part where the one plane gets hit and the propeller like explodes and like goes down in flame and crashes, like that looked amazing. That was some very good
Yeah.
effects. So this episode is basically from where we left episode one, taking off for the day before D-Day, and then it ends after D-Day, so the next night, like the night of D-Day. And so we don't really get to see much of the or any of the actual operation of like D-Day, storming Normandy, any of that. We're solely focused on Easy Company and their mission. Once they land, to get together, and then they're assigned to go take out some artillery in this town of.
It's a French estate. It's called Brecourt. I don't know what the town is, but that's where like the estate is where the four like cannons that they have are set up at. Yeah, it's at Brecourt Manor.
I didn't realize this before. I was actually so my current job, like we started each day and we kind of had to like introduce ourselves so everyone knows your position or whatever. And then yesterday the thing was say what show you're watching or movie. And so I was like, oh, well, I just started Band of Brothers. And so then I was talking to a guy who one of the audio dudes had worked on something with one of the guys who the Band of Brothers is based off of, like the last living one. Did a thing in Normandy with him. And so he, when I was talking to him, was like, oh, yeah, like they do those interviews at the beginning of every episode to like tie in. And so I didn't realize that every episode starts like that, but like so powerful. These like, and it's literally just like 2 minutes of like these interviews, but like the one the one guy said something that like really caught my eye, that it's like each man must do that himself, must prepare himself mentally for like what's going on around you. And then later there's another man who is talking about like all the men they lost that day, and like it's 2001, he had to be what, 17, 18 probably, and 43 are we at, or 40, 45 I guess. Dylan doesn't know D-days. It's 1945, so he's probably 18. Uh, so like this man 55, 60 years later is still like he's about to start crying in this interview. Like he's still not mentally and emotionally like healed from what he witnessed and like the horrors of war. Like it's insane to think about that. So many young men at that point in time went through it's.
But yeah, the stuff these guys saw where it was like literally as the holes in the plane were blowing open, like people were losing like their legs, like they were just like they were going faster than their like their feet were going faster than their legs could go. It was just like just what crazy stuff you're seeing that yeah, you can do the hill at Currahee over and over and over again, but that's not going to prep you for watching, you know, someone lose a leg or someone lose their life right in front of you. My biggest thing with this was that yeah, what I mean also just right away you're you go through all of episode 1 and then like towards the end of episode 1 it's like, "Oh, you've got your new commanding officer, Lieutenant Meehan." And then it was just within like a couple minutes of episode 2, R.I.P. Meehan. We kept talking about like which one's gonna go and which one like they're gonna get us connected to before their death
Yeah.
means something. And it was just kind of like, oh, well, they killed off the one guy who, to be honest, I couldn't remember who the hell it was to begin with. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
for people who may not have seen the episode or just need a little refresher, when Winters lands, he's completely apart from the rest of his group or his company. He finds Hall, who is a soldier in the Alpha Company, and tags along with him. Basically, like commands him because he's the ranking officer, and kind of as they go, they meet more of Easy Company, meet more soldiers from other companies, but they keep Hall in their group even when they go into the artillery mission. And then later on in the artillery mission, Donnie Wahlberg's character is fucking MIA with the TNT when they need it to blow the guns, and then Hall has the TNT, helps their group, and then literally like 5 minutes later, Hall's dead. Winters barely knew this dude. Like he knew of him, knew like he was in Alpha Company or whatever, but like he's still like torn up that he lost a dude in battle, and it's the first day, and I mean, I feel like it just goes to show you what a genuine dude Winters is. Like how altruistic he is that he's like, I want to go into battle and I want to bring all my dudes back. Like,
Yeah. No, I think that's such a big part of this episode was really showing you even more so who Winters is as a character. Obviously, in episode 1, the lingering thought is like he's the main character, and after this one, you're like, okay, yeah, I understand that even more so now. I said I'm curious just based off of what I know from seeing like the Pacific, if he'll be as much of the lead in every episode. I have a feeling as we move forward, they'll tell some of the other story. Because, I mean, like we said in episode 1, you're introduced to so many people. In this episode, you don't see like half of.
it's really
You don't see
condensed.
like half of the people that you're kind of introduced. I mean, you've got
You see
Malarkey,
Malarkey,
Grenier,
yeah.
Popeye.
Nixon shows up at the
Yeah.
end.
And oh my god, I'm blanking. Buck, but I can't remember his last name. Compton, Buck Compton. He
Are you talking about Donnie
no.
Wahlberg's character?
Wow, now I'm blanking on the actor's name too. Neil McDonough's character. He's like the
Oh
second in
yeah,
command that they introduce like also towards the
he's the
end.
dude with like the super blue eyes.
Yes. Yeah. The guy who's
He's
typically
like
a bad guy
his
in
face
everything.
is so memorable that like I had to like look him up because I was like his face is so like unique. I know him from
Yeah.
something.
He's in a lot. But he's also really good in this. But yeah, he's the guy that like they introduce when Winters is like, hey, don't get too comfortable playing poker, don't win their money
Yeah,
because they'll resent you for it.
and then he's kind of the guy who's like sort of pushing Winters the whole time of like, well, like your superior is missing, so like that makes you the leader of Easy Company now.
Yeah.
Like when they get called, like they're like, hey, we want Easy Company in this like run, like in this meeting or whatever, and he's like, hey, like, that's you, dude. Like, I know you may not be ready for that, but like you're there, so time to get in there. I thought it was kind of interesting. I feel well, I don't know, like maybe the more will develop over time, or maybe Winters kind of squashed it there at the end, but like Garnier and Winter's relationship, especially early on in this episode, when they're like when they're going along to get to the artillery cannons that they were going to take down, they meet a German squadron, and Winters tells them like, "Hold off until my signal." And Garnier goes ahead and like shoots before he gets the signal, and then like after everyone is dead, continues shooting people. They kind of have like a moment of like conflict there. And then later on, Garnier's like talking to the other troops, talking about how he's a Quaker and like, kind of like he's a prude. Like, why would you get mad that I'm killing? I'm going to use the words from the show, Krauts. Towards the end of the episode, after the mission, all the guys are hanging out in the tent, And Winter's like, he knows now at this point that like Garnier's brother has passed, and all this, and like kind of camaraderie with them. He goes and drinks, which he doesn't usually drink after this like fucked up day that he just had. Goes and drinks, and then like just side comment at the end is like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm not a Quaker. Like, and the dudes like love it. So he kind of, I don't know if he's actually squashing that like conflict there, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, cool, or if that'll be something that builds up more over time. It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
I think that was kind of his like. I think he heard them. How can we trust this guy? He doesn't even drink. Some sort of Quaker yada yada yada. I think when he took the drink and then was like, by the way, I'm not a Quaker, was his way of being like, understand. Like, I think that was their way of burying the hatchet and kind of like, we're on the same page. So I don't think it'll
Yeah,
go
like
back
we're
to
all we're
more.
all in this together, kind of.
Yeah, I don't think it'll go back to more conflict, but
God, Malarkey pissed me off. Trying to get the fucking Luger, like, I I can't believe he almost died for that. Like, that was ridiculous. I was face palming the whole time when he like ran out into the middle, like the no man's land in between the two sides to try and find this gun for his brother. I think he said.
yeah, he said he promised his brother a real German Luger.
I was like, come on, man, what are you doing? And then the dude didn't even have one.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I I think the crazier part to me was that he still pulled that shit after the what he had witnessed earlier. Like he comes across. So again, for people who are either aren't watching the series and just deciding to get the entertainment out of listening to us poorly recap it and talk about things, or for people who watched it maybe a while ago but haven't seen it in a long time and don't remember. Um, After Winters meets up with the rest of, well, most of the rest of Easy Company, the ones that we all, at least we see, they're walking kind of through and they pass by a group of, like, German POWs. And they're kind of making fun of them, and in a Irish accent, he asks where they're from. And the one, German POW says, what is
Eugene, Oregon.
And he goes, wait, what? He goes, yeah, I'm from Eugene, Oregon. And he's like, no way. And then they get talking about how they grew up in like the same places and this and that.
Yeah, he said he's from Astoria.
Yeah, but it was one thing where like the German soldier had said, we got the call to come back to protect the motherland, so we came back to fight for our home country.
Yeah, that all true Aryans would come back or something
Yeah,
along those lines.
yeah. So he's there, and then they're kind of talking, and then Larky gets called to go ahead, and as he passes this soldier with a machine gun, and as he's walking off, he can just hear the machine gun firing, and he turns around and sees that they've basically just killed all these POWs.
Massacred.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of which being an American citizen. So you would think at that point, like, you would have the understanding of it's not worth it for me to be so focused on something as trivial as a gun to bring home to my brother.
Maybe in that moment of time, or just like in his mind, that like it's to us, it's something trivial, but to him, like maybe that's something that he highly values. So that it was like if I'm gonna make it out of this, like I'm gonna bring this back to my brother, kind of thing. Like I don't know. It's hard to put into perspective for us because like given in this episode, not that many Americans die, but like one we see Hall die, and then the other one that like I remember pretty vividly was like the two dudes laying in the field, and the one guy is like, I'm gonna go back here, and then like picks his head up and just gets blasted, and you're just like, fuck. You see stuff like that, and you're like, well, why the fuck would Malarkey ever run out there? Like, what are you doing, dude? It's not for the mission. It's not for anything else. Like, it's literally like a selfish personal gain, basically. So it's hard for us to be like, oh yeah, like why would you ever do that? But I don't know, like in that moment in time, you're probably just so, and it's new. I feel like that's the other thing is like you don't necessarily, even though like you said, like would they kill the prisoners and stuff. I feel like you don't necessarily understand the like the seriousness of the situation. Perhaps like I mean, obviously, like it is serious. Like, hey, like we're battling with guns. Like, there's so much going on, but at the same time, I feel like when you get into a serious situation in life, sometimes you don't quite understand the ultimate like repercussions that can happen from that situation, and especially at like what they're 18.
Yeah.
I really like that that is the thing where it's like you don't quite understand the whole morality of it. I'm sure they come to grasp with it through time because it's kind of like the big thing in this episode to me where they kind of show that moment is there's the dude hanging in the tree who like didn't make it to the ground and got killed in the tree, and it's like that's kind of that moment where they show you that where it's like, oh, there's a serious element to like Americans are at risk too. Like,
What was crazy to me was even more so than that. It looks like they kind of walk up, they get whatever supplies they can off the guy. Like they don't even try to cut the body down. They're just like, okay, well, we got what we can. Move on.
yeah, I mean, I forget which character it is, but one of them is just like, if you're getting supplies, you're getting them now, like from your dead comrades. Like it just kind of like shows how fucked up the whole situation is.
Yeah, which I know was one of the other interesting things that they kind of showed us when they after the assault on the Germans. I thought it was just kind of a cool thing that you don't see a lot of, that they don't really kind of talk about and things like that, is that Winters then just kind of picks up like the German rifle and kind of has that with him until up until they pass those, I think the Americans in the field, and that's where he kind of picks up another like M1. Yeah, just kind of a nice thing to see, because I know a lot of the times it always just seems that it's like, oh yeah, he makes it fine without anything until he gets back to wherever, and then he gets another, American firearm. Also thought it was cool the fact that they literally show them running out of ammo too. Another thing that like typically in war movies and things like war movies and shows they never really talk about or show. But for Winters to be like, do you need anything? Yeah, I'm out of. If you have ammunition, I'm out. Like anything you can have or anything you've got.
Yeah, or then like the when the other team came in, I think it was Dog Company came in, they brought them ammo,
Yeah,
and then also just like the fact that, and it comes up later that I wasn't really piecing together, but like Dog Company kind of just runs straight at the other bunker, and like most of the dudes just get smoked. But then later in the episode, it teaches you like, hey, the way Easy Company did it is the way that it's supposed to be done.
and the way that it's taught.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it was cool when it's like it's still taught.
which is crazy that like when you think about what is 55, 60 years, like I mean, I'm sure it's probably still taught today, but like that the tactics of war have not evolved, even though the technology is crazy now, and there's like all sorts of shit. The tactics of war have not evolved beyond what we were doing 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good thing too. That it's just like there's not enough of I don't know, not enough need for a ton of new, tactical
That there hasn't been that
things.
much war,
Yes,
or
yes. As much as I say it,
or
like
that we've
I say that like we haven't lost a ton of people to a bunch of different conflicts and that, but
I don't want to say the beginning is slow. It's not slow. It's very intense. But comparing the beginning in my eyes, like where they're jumping to the other part of the episode once they land and all that, like I think the whole thing is super tense, but like to me that second part where they're down on the field and like it's a more intimate battle in my eyes, it's zero breathing room. like the whole time. Like the cinematography is like super intimate. It's shaky. It's handheld. Sometimes it's tough to follow the action of what's happening, but I think that's a good thing. I think that like kind of shows like an authentic edge to what is happening, and it kind of makes you uneasy. Like there was one shot that was kind of nuts to me where there was like the camera was like Dutch angled and like pointed up and like they're just running into the bunker, and I'm like, that shot is like ugly, but at the same time I'm like, it's probably accurate to like what you're envisioning and like seeing when you're just running to survive. At one point I think it was like maybe 10-15 minutes left. I had to like I checked the time in the episode because I was like, how long have I been watching this? Because it's going so fast, and then at the, I was like, oh, 15 minutes left. I mean, how are they gonna wrap this up? Like, we're still highly active in an intense battle. I was like, how are they gonna wrap up this episode with 15 minutes left? Like it was a very quick 45 minutes. I think it is what the episode is,
Something like that.
somewhere around there.
Yeah. Yeah, this one, it, yeah, it definitely, this was one that just, and it doesn't feel like 49 minutes. It literally feels like it's a half hour episode. Like it just moves, which is great.
It feels like a half hour, but at the same time, I'm so stressed and on edge. It also could have been an hour and a half, like, which I'm not complaining about. Like I like stuff like that where it's like it's intense and I feel this emotion, and at the same time, I'm like, oh no, I don't want it to end. It's almost like it's almost over.
Yeah, this also was an episode that, uh, we talked in during the first episode recording of doing this series about wanting to go into episode 2 to see what happens, and all these different things. This one was so hard for me to finish this episode and not immediately start the next one. It was like, no, no, you can't do it. But I was like, oh, I want to. Like, this was the one that really sunk the hook in, where I'm like, I could binge this in about a day. I think I could start this thing and just knock it out by the end of the day tomorrow and just have no guilt at all doing it.
I agree. I do think that this is like one where I was like, I could just watch the next one, and yeah, same. Like this kind of hooked me in. Not that the first episode is bad. The first episode is fine. It's introducing you to everyone, and it's the precursor. But this is the one where I was like, oh yeah, this is the show that I thought I was gonna get.
Yeah, this was the one that, like I said, it got me hook, line, and sinker. I understood the first one, and it got me in the terms of like, it's introduced the characters, and now I'm interested to see where we go from here. This one was like, oh god, I want to see more of these stories, or what if this is, with the way this episode was, for this to be episode 2, I was just like that. The rest of this, it has to keep, like, I very much doubt that they were like, we'll tell this story in episode 2 and that'll be like the climax of the series. Like, it's got to build up from here, and the fact that it could build up from here is impressive.
I didn't watch anything, but I saw episode descriptions either on Max or IMDb or something. I don't remember, but like I'm interested to see what happens now, in the sense of like I think episode 3 still kind of like keeps this like up action like war going on. But then like a couple episodes later, it was like, oh, Easy Company goes back to Britain for a thing, and I was like, huh? Like, is there gonna be a lull again? I'm so confused about like what's gonna happen, and just see the whole like just see how it plays out. I guess like will we get that like reprieve in one of these episodes? Because if that's the case, then it's very interesting to me. Once again, we were talking last week about the how this show is pretty good, like a great streamer of like episode 1 led into episode 2 really well. Will episode 2 lead into episode 3 really well? Like, and then is episode 4 going to be a lull? Because if that's the case, then I feel like that's a very old TV kind of thing where, at least, for me, I watch a decent amount of anime. It'd be like a filler episode, sort of, where it's like, all right, we just had this crazy, like, training arc battle, and then, like, here's an episode where we show the side character doing this thing, and we bring in some new guy.
And the
It's
whole
like,
time, Goku is
all
just
right.
summoning the Spirit Bomb for all 20 minutes. Next time.
I feel like you don't really get that nowadays in like the streaming world.
I would guess that they exist, but there's a reason I think that you might not even notice them at this point now is that they're binged. It's not like you waited a week to watch this and then you were just like, nothing happened this episode. This was just set up. Now I have to wait another, like, you hit the conclusion of an episode and then you don't have to wait a week to see what happens next. You're waiting 2 weeks because you've got a filler episode, or 3 weeks if there's multiple filler episodes. So it's just one of those things now where it's like you might have a filler episode on a streaming service, but you finish that episode and it rolls right into the next thing and you're like, oh yeah, okay. This going through and waiting to watch episodic TV, it's nostalgic and yet also a reminder of like, man, do I love the ability to just watch everything all the way through and not have to worry about waiting for anything. The instant gratification is love it.
Unrelated to that at all, and will probably be cut. It's crazy. This episode came out 2 days before 9/11.
I meant to look when we were talking about it and you said it, the show came out in 2001. I was like, I wonder how this was coming out, if it was during or around, or if it came out after.
And they
And I
didn't.
was like, well,
They didn't skip a
it has
beat.
a pretty good shot.
The third episode came out the very next week. So that's what. After I saw it was 2 days before, I was like, did they keep this on schedule? Because I feel like that might have been a thing where people were not ready for that.
It's an
But
interesting conversation of the fact that I know so much post 9/11 media that was any bit patriotic, how much that captured audiences at the time. It does make me wonder. I mean, I know, I know people that have watched this, and we have friends who've seen it that said, on a rewatch they would maybe come back and record a podcast on it, but here we are. People that have watched it a lot more recently than 2001 who still swear by it. So, but I do wonder how much that, it being a product of coming out around that time, how much that really kind of helped boost the show and its I don't want to I don't know how to put it, helped it and its popularity, and I guess it's like staying power.
yeah, like it's legacy kind of.
Yes, that's what I was looking. I was gonna say it's memory, but that just seems kind of weird. It's not what I wanted to say.
I'm interested to see if we're gonna just keep going with the action, the constant action like this episode was. Like, is every battle scene or gunfighting scene gonna be like this, where it's a sustained like 20-25 minute gun battle? Like, how, I don't see how that could be possible for the series to tell this whole story, because I feel like it's a big overarching story. So I feel like we're also going to skip around a bit.
Yeah,
And then
I definitely think it's
how do
gonna
we do the
jump.
skipping with like how do we do the jumps with like, I mean, our Easy Company is kind of down to like our four dudes. Like, is it going to still just be our four guys, or are we going to find them in the next episode? Or are we going to just show up in the next episode and more guys are there? Like,
I think we'll probably see. Okay, so this is just again having not seen this, here's what I'm thinking is at some point in the next episode, maybe two ways it's going to play out. The next episode will focus on like what the other half of Easy Company is doing, and then towards the end they'll do a meetup, or they'll do the meetup and then they'll kind of do everything through flashback, and then kind of like the first episode will kind of catch up. You'll see everything, and then maybe they'll tell what the other group did during flashback, leading into the end of the episode, and then it'll kind of end in the meetup. I'm curious to see. They talked about the map that was found, and that it was, Winters gives it to Nixon, yeah, and Nixon is like, I passed it up, Army intelligence. I'm curious to see like what that's going to lead to and what all, how important that map actually is going to end up being, because they make it seem like it's very important. So I'm curious to know if that's going to be the case or if that's just the last we hear of it.
Yeah, they almost kind of made it like a classic throwaway line where it was like, hey, that map, I passed it up, and it was kind of like, hey, cool. All right, do 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 do. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check us out next week as we watch episode 3 of Band of Brothers. Hope you're watching along with us. Check it out on Max, and check out our other episodes, Cocktails and Classics Pod. Check out our website, www.cocktailsandclassicspod.com, our Instagram, and let us know what you thought of episode 2 if you're just watching it. And share us with your friends and family. And as always, watch responsibly.